The Egyptian President Sisi offers condolences to the Indian Prime Minister and condemns terrorism following the Kashmir attack. Israeli occupation army orders evacuation in Beit Hanun and Sheikh Zayed, and 52 Palestinians killed in Gaza strikes. Iranian foreign minister warns the U.S. envoy of challenges in finalizing nuclear deal by Trump's deadline. These were the headlines, and now the news in detail. The Egyptian President Abdel Fattah al-Sisi expressed his sincere condolences to the Indian Prime Minister Narendra Modi and the Indian government, offering Egypt solidarity with the families of the victims of the terrorist attack that targeted tourists in Kashmir. President al-Sisi emphasized Egypt's condemnation of all forms of terrorism and highlighted Egypt's efforts to combat terrorism and extremist ideologies through a comprehensive approach that considers all aspects related to this phenomenon. Presidential spokesperson Ambassador Mohammed El-Shenawi added that the conversation also focused on the importance of intensifying high-level communication to explore new avenues for cooperation that would fulfill the aspirations of both nations for progress and prosperity. King Abdullah II of Jordan expressed condolences to the Indian Prime Minister Narendra Modi for the victims of the armed attack in Jammu and Kashmir. And during a phone call with Modi, King Abdullah reaffirmed his country's rejection of all forms of violence while wishing a swift recovery to the injured. And the town of Pahalgam in the Kashmir region has witnessed a horrific armed attack that resulted in the death of 26 people, including local tourists, while they were visiting a famous natural area. According to testimonies from survivors, the attackers deliberately targeted men. Local authorities described the attack as one of the deadliest in civilians in recent years. Indian Prime Minister Narendra Modi has vowed to track down and hold accountable all those responsible for the violent attack in Kashmir. In his first speech since the attack, Modi affirmed that India will identify the terrorists and those who support them, pursue them, and bring them to justice. The Indian government has announced the expulsion of Pakistani diplomats and the closure of the main border crossing between the two countries. It also decided to suspend the 1960 Indus Waters Treaty, downgrade diplomatic relations with Pakistan, and gave migrants holding valid permits until May the 1st to return through the crossing. The Indian Ministry of External Affairs has requested all Pakistani citizens residing in the country to leave before the end of April. The ministry specified that all Pakistani nationals currently in India must depart before their visa expiry dates, April the 27th for regular visas and April 29th for medical visas. It also announced the immediate suspension of visa issuance for Pakistani citizens.
The CCS condemned the attack in the strongest terms and expressed its...
And Pakistani government has declared the Indian naval and air defense advisors in Islamabad as persona non grata and demanded that they leave the country. The government added that visas granted to Indian citizens will be cancelled, except for Sikh pilgrims. Additionally, it announced the closure of the borders, the suspension of trade between the two countries, and the closure of its airspace to Indian airlines. And Egypt has strongly condemned the terrorist attack that targeted tourists in Kashmir from various countries, resulting in dozens of civilian casualties and injuries. In a statement by the Ministry of Foreign Affairs, Egypt, its government and people expressed sincere condolences and heartfelt sympathy to the government and people of India, as well as to the families of the victims. Egypt affirmed its solidarity with India in confronting all forms of violence and terrorism aimed at undermining the country's security and stability. The United States has warned its citizens against traveling to the Indian-administered part of Kashmir or being within 10 kilometers of the India-Pakistan border. The U.S. Department of State stated that terrorist attacks and civil unrest are likely in the Kashmir region and therefore urged its citizens to avoid traveling to the area. The statement also advised American nationals to steer clear of areas within 10 kilometers of the India-Pakistan border due to the risk of armed conflict.
We must make the State Department great again. In its current form, the department is bloated.
And now we move on to the latest updates in Gaza. Israeli occupation army has issued new evacuation orders for areas in Beit Hanun and Sheikh Zayed in the northern Gaza Strip. And meanwhile, Palestinian medical sources reported that 52 people have been killed in Israeli airstrikes on the Gaza Strip since dawn today. Palestinians have gathered at a soup kitchen in Gaza Beit Lahia to receive hot meals. Israel has imposed a complete blockade on all goods into Gaza since the beginning of March. Emergency meal distributions are ending, bakeries are closed, and markets are empty. Israel denies that Gaza is facing a hunger crisis, and the occupation military accuses Hamas, who have run Gaza, of exploiting aid and says it must keep all supplies out to prevent the fighters from getting it. Hamas denies exploiting aid and accuses Israel of using starvation as a military tactic. The death toll from the Israeli occupation's aggression on the Gaza Strip since October the 7th, 2023, has risen to more than 51,300, while more than 117,200 others wounded. Medical sources reported that 50 Palestinians were killed and 152 wounded others were taken to hospitals in the Gaza Strip in the past 24 hours. Medical sources also reported that 1,978 people were killed and 5,207 others were wounded since March the 18th. Israeli settlers have invaded the Al-Aqsa Mosque compound in the occupied Jerusalem, protected by Israeli police, and the Palestinian news agency reported that dozens of settlers entered the mosque in groups and conducting provocative tours and performing Jewish rituals. Security sources reported that arrested 3 citizens today and raided several towns in El Governorate, including the War and El and the towns of Samu, Dura, and Surif. They also entered the Qalandiya camp north of Jerusalem. And for more analysis, we now move to Rihim in our newsroom.
Yes, Salma, thank you so much for further analysis. We're joined from Cairo by Professor of Political Science at Al-Quds University, Dr. Ayman Al-Raqab. Good evening to you, sir, and welcome to Qnews. It affected the supply of food and medical resources for children in Gaza.
After a great anxiety, esteemed audiences, we're talking about a crisis that's taken place on daily basis since the 1st of March. Never entered anything related to the basic needs. So it used to be 500 shipments used to access the Gaza. And we've heard at the WHO that is calling of the necessity of entering the bio vaccinations to the children, and these matters should come in before May. So we're approaching only a few days, and then otherwise we'll be having a great disaster for the children. All these other crises that would affect the defenseless civilians of Gazans.
Hello? Right. Now, how do the recent actions of Israeli settlers at Al-Aqsa Mosque influence the broader situation in the region?
When a Jewish organization in the slogan of the destruction of Al-Aqsa Mosque, and some extremist groups such as the Guardians of the Temple and the custodians of the Temple to raiding Al-Aqsa Mosque and serving the prayers of Talmud and doing Jewish rituals inside. All this that would lead to the religious conflict that we've been warning for a long time, and this would extend far beyond the Al-Aqsa Mosque and Gaza. So the extremists, they are pouring the oil on fire to ignite the fire. So the matter won't be easier for the Palestinians, either are Christians or Muslims. The matter isn't related to the Muslims. We've seen how do they prevent the Christians to their ritual path in the miseries. Even the Christian places have been affected by the Jews, and of course the Jewish religion is totally has nothing to do with such deeds, and we've been warning this for a long time, and otherwise the whole region will ignite further.
Right, now, what were the reasons behind Spain's choice to cancel the ammunition agreement with the Israeli company?
Spain thankfully took such a measure that knew that ammunition will be used against the defenseless and the innocent civilian people. So what's happening in Gaza is just like a massacre, and we're talking about striking a tent, sheltering the displaced people, and full martyrs, and most of them from civilians, women, children in Al-Tufah, eastern of Gaza, in Rafah, in Khan Yunis, and even the so-called safe zones targeted the Israeli arms. Spain took a decision that the whole world should pursue. Unfortunately, US, the big finance of such a massacre, systematically baited Israeli-occupied forces, Spain decided to stand before the justice.
Right, that was Professor Dr. Ayman Raqab, from Professor of Political Science from Al-Quds. We thank you so much for being with us and for your insights here on Q News. And now we go back to Salma Al-Fiqi in our studio.
Thank you, Mona. And that was Monam Selhi in our newsroom. And the Lebanese President Joseph Aoun has stated that the Lebanese army continues its deployments in southern towns from which Israel has withdrawn. During a meeting with the UNIFIL commander, General Aroldo Lazzaro, at the Baabda Palace, Aoun emphasized that the Lebanese army is responsible for clearing mines and removing armed presence in these southern areas, despite the challenges posed by the terrain. He called for an end to the Israeli occupation of 5 hills to ensure stability along the southern border and facilitate residents' return to their villages. And we move on now to a news conference at the White House with President Donald Trump and the Norwegian Foreign Minister.
Marco just mentioned something that maybe we should talk about for just a second, if we could, Mr. Prime Minister. And you're involved in it too, because you've been involved in the world and peace. But I think we're doing very well with respect to Iran, and we're having very serious meetings. And there are only 2 options, and the one option is not a good option. It's not a good option at all. And I think we're doing very well on an agreement with Iran, but that one, we're doing a lot of things, I will say, but that one is well on its way. We could have a very, very good decision, and a lot of lives will be saved.
Mr. President, on the economy, there was a slowdown. Mr. President, on the economy, there was a slowdown as it relates to home sales in the month of March, the slowest pace since 2009. Is that an economic indicator, and perhaps the Treasury Secretary can weigh in on this as well, is that an economic indicator that concerns you about the broader U.S. economy?
No, they had very good numbers on housing today, extremely good numbers, and that's despite interest rates, because, you know, if you look at what happened, everyone said, oh, I said I was going to get prices down. I did. Energy just hit $1.98 in a couple of states. It's way down. Energy's down, and we're about $64 a barrel. When I came in, and we were looking at $89, $90, $95. And by the way, that helps us solve the war too. Having those energy prices is a big incentive for Russia to also agree with solving the war problem. Groceries are down. When I was with you 2 months ago, you were complaining about eggs. I said, I just got here. I was here for about a week when the press started saying about eggs have gone through the roof. I said, I just got here. Tell me about eggs. And they have been. They went through the roof and you couldn't get them. So we just had a big Easter egg hunt at the White House. Thousands and thousands of eggs. And the price was down 87%. So we did a great job. Housing is doing very well. We should lower interest rates. That's the Fed. I hope they lower interest rates. That's a smart thing to do. Be ahead a little bit, although already it's a little bit late. But in the end, we just have a great country. We have a very strong country, and we have every other country. I can't think of one country that doesn't want to negotiate a deal. And they either negotiate a deal or we set a deal that we think is fair. Because we don't have to go through all of these. It would be physically impossible. You know, you have so many people that really understand it, which is a very small group of people here. And we are going to, at some point, just set prices for deals. Some will be tariffed. Some treated us very unfairly. They'll be tariffed higher than others. but we've been ripped off for many, many years. The United States has been ripped off like no country probably in the history of the world has been ripped off for 45, 50 years. And countries have gone rich by doing that with the United States. We've taken care of their militaries, and military is another subject we talk about. We're not going to make that subject to any of the deals, but you know the same countries that I do where we virtually take care of their military and then don't get treated fairly on trade. So the people, and I don't blame those countries, I blame the people that sat at that beautiful desk right behind you, because those people didn't do the job for this country. And they let us lose $4 billion a day on trade. We were losing $4 or $5 billion a day on trade when I got here. And now we're going to be much better than breaking even. And we're going to be making $4 or $5 billion a day on trade. So, I don't blame any country, not the worst of them. And we were abused by countries. I blame the President of the United States that happened to be sitting when these deals were made. Disgraceful. When I was here, we had a great 4 years. We had the most successful economy in the history of our country, my first term. And we were very tough on trade. And with China, as you know, they paid hundreds of billions of dollars in tariffs. But nobody else ever did that. China paid not 10 cents to any other president. And but not only China, virtually every country got away with murder. And we just can't let that happen. Thank you very much, everybody. Thank you very much. Appreciate it. Thank you very much.
Thank you, President. Thanks, everybody. Now, please start with you. Thank you. Thanks, everybody. Thank you, press. Now, let's go. Thank you. Thank you. Keep going. Keep moving. Thank you. Thank you, press. Peter, Al, thank you.
Sorry.
I just finished. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you. No more photos. Thanks, everybody. Keep moving.
And we were just watching the press conference at the White House with President Donald Trump and the Norwegian Prime Minister. And the Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu has vowed to prevent Iran from obtaining a nuclear weapon. Netanyahu stated that the regime in Iran poses a threat not only to Israel's future, but also to the fate and future of all human society. He warned that this would be the consequence if Iran were to obtain nuclear weapons. Meanwhile, negotiations continue between Iran and the United States over Tehran's rapidly advancing nuclear program. Iranian Foreign Minister informed the U.S. envoy Steve Witkoff that it may not be possible to finalize a nuclear agreement by the deadline proposed by the U.S. President Donald Trump. According to the American website Axios, the Iranian foreign minister told the U.S. envoy that the technical details of any nuclear agreement would make it difficult to complete negotiations within 60 days. And to Russia, the U.S. President Donald Trump expressed his belief that Russian President Vladimir Putin would listen to him and hold strikes on Ukraine. During a meeting with the Norwegian Prime Minister at the White House, Trump stressed the need for Russia and Ukraine to engage in negotiations to reach a ceasefire. Trump stated that each week both Russians and Ukrainians are losing around 5,000 soldiers due to the ongoing war.
So we are thinking that very strongly that they both want peace.
White House spokesperson Caroline Leavitt has stated that the U.S. President Donald Trump is frustrated with the slow progress in negotiations to end the conflict in Ukraine. She emphasized that Trump desires peace and an end to violence, but believes both sides must be willing to cooperate. Leavitt expressed concern that President Vladimir Zelensky is holding and heading in the wrong direction regarding negotiations, which is contributing to Trump's dwindling patience. And that brings us to the end of our news bulletin, and here's what we've been covering. Egyptian President El-Sisi offers condolences to the Indian Prime Minister and condemns terrorism following Kashmir attack. Israeli occupation army orders evacuation in Beit Hanun and Sheikh Zayed, and 52 Palestinians killed in Gaza strikes. Iranian Foreign Minister warns the U.S. envoy of challenges in finalizing nuclear deal by Trump's deadline. This concludes our news bulletin for the hour, and don't forget to follow Q News on YouTube, Facebook, X, Instagram, and TikTok at QNewsEG to stay informed. And thank you for watching, and stay tuned for more updates on Q News.